And at the end of the presentation, I will read them and ask to Dick. With this, I finish the introduction, and Dick, this is the stage for you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon from where I am near Washington, D.C. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I appreciate all you taking your time out of your busy schedules to be able to participate today. Sadly, I need to open this on a rather sad note in that we lost one of our authors yesterday, Glenda Mayo, who was at UNC Charlotte. She had a long battle with cancer, and unfortunately, she was taken from us far too young, and we will miss her terribly on our future efforts. Our prayers go out to her family, certainly. What I'm going to do today is provide an overview. Provide an overview of our book, and just in the time that we have today, just to go through and what we're trying to do overall is to build build talent in the AECOO industry, and it's very broad. And we'll talk about that various aspects of that today. It's a 246-page book. Its first edition was published by Wiley in April of 2021. And it's a result of years of research that we've been actually working on with experts in every aspect of the AECOO industry. I should also mention that the authors are all associated with the Academic Interoperability Coalition, or the AIC, which has been active for over 15 years, studying and hopefully guiding the evolution of BIM education. The AIC is comprised of a collection of over 80 universities. I think we're about 85 plus. 2/3 of those are US based. So we do have a lot of representation from the international community also. So in
sorry, Dick. Sorry, Dick. Do you want to share your presentation also?
Oh, it's not being shared.
Because I take for the video.
It
yes.
Must have gone away. Okay, we had it shared earlier. Let me hold on. Let me
yes.
Pull that back. Sorry about that. We had it up there earlier. Let's see. Share screen. Share there. I guess maybe when we went off to the
yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. Let me get my note screen back. Let's see. Oh, maybe I have to. Let's see here. What's happening? Here we go. Okay, is it still up? It's still all right, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. So developing BIM talent consists of 6 chapters. We will go through each one of those at a level of detail afforded by this probably about 30-minute presentation. And then I'll leave time, as mentioned at the end, to respond to questions that may arise during the presentation, as well as participate in any additional discussions that you'd like to have in this subject area. I'll explain how and why we wrote the book and the research involved, and how it should really impact the AECOO industry. And the AECOO we define as architects, engineers, contractors, owners, and operators. So it really is. It is a broad life cycle approach, which is really one of the things that we're pushing in this whole concept, is that it is a life cycle approach, and we'll talk about that too. While the book is primarily focused on educators, it also really applies to practitioners that are attempting to define their next steps in education related to BIM, VDC, or even digital twins. It will also help inform you of the questions that you need to ask before you select an institution for your continuing education. These are some of the important underlying issues that the book addresses. Primarily, that we need education that supports the life cycle approach, as currently only a few schools have this orientation. An important concept is building a T-shaped learner or practitioner who has a depth of knowledge in the area of their expertise, as well as good understanding of the authoritative sources from which information comes, as well as who are all the people that can use the information that they create in their phase of the project. It also points out important distinction between education and training. And I might take a step here to say that one of the issues that we found is that one university might have a college that is teaching BIM, but the other colleges, related colleges like architecture, engineering, or construction, are not. So you'll get the focus in one of those colleges, but not necessarily the other. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. How do we expand across the an entire university? But we'd also like to see where we coordinate through different colleges. And the concept there is that we don't want to have a situation where it depends primarily on which school you're going to as far as what you know about BIM. We want to really have that be broad across the whole spectrum around a globe, worldwide. Also, that we want to talk about the difference between education and training. That was one of the things that we found early on, was that people were training. They were providing training as to how to use a piece of software, such as Autodesk or something, one of the Autodesk tools. But what we really want to see is that an education and understanding of what is BIM and how does BIM work across the board. Note I started out with learning, say for example, word processing. Started out with a program called WordStar, which probably most of you young folks might not even know about. But then we got into I think it was Multimate after that, and then we got into WordPerfect, and then ultimately we've kind of all settled on Microsoft Word. But all these other tools are out there, and my English class in school was where I learned how to write, but the tool that I used has varied over the years. So this is a concept called Bloom's taxonomy. You have to excuse me today. I'm probably drink a little extra water because we've got spring in Washington, D.C. area, and the pollen is out pretty heavily. So hopefully I won't cough too much or anything during the session. But this is Bloom's taxonomy. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it is really very often used in the education community. And I'm sure there's lots of different versions of this. But the bottom line is it kind of starts at the bottom with, with just being able to remember things. You go out and learn how to a spelling test or something like that. And you recognize different things and all that. Then you get up to understanding. Once you understand the concept, you have to be able to apply those concepts. Then you get into analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So, that's kind of the different levels of complexity, I guess you could say, in education as far as what you're accomplishing. So, what we want to do is get to that point of being able to create, be able to design, be able to, generate ideas and things like that, and combine ideas and those kind of things. And that's the real challenge that we have as educators and as really practitioners too, in being able to understand all of this. So simply remembering a fact is at the base, and that's the basic approach. But then being able to get a higher level of thinking is really the goal. The first chapter is our call to BIM, and the BOK is a body of knowledge. And in this chapter, we attempt to put everything in context for the rest of the book. We answer the question as to why a BIM block was critical and why now? Why do we need to put that together? We discuss the history how BIM has been progressing internationally, and what the current status of education is. We link the BIM box to current use cases for BIM being used worldwide, and provide some case studies demonstrating the broad spectrum of BIM, from megastructures to infrastructure projects, as well as relatively small projects. The concepts are very scalable, and that's what we want to try to get across in this too, is that, you know, it doesn't have to be just the huge projects that you use it on, but you can use it on rather small projects too. And really the goal is to, you know, understand the need for trained BIM managers and BIM aware practitioners at every level. This is, you know, what we're finding is, you know, you just have to have that BIM knowledge. You have to have that T-shaped concept that we talked about, you know, really understanding the whole process across the board. And this is, if you look at what some of the you know, the teaching that's out there right now, it's very, very oriented towards one specific area. You know, for example, in the United States, it's the Associated General Contractors, the AGC, has credentialing out to become, you know, certified with BIM, but it's not, it's very much focused on just contracting. It doesn't really identify that you get a lot of information out of design, and then you're providing that information ultimately to the owner to be able to operate that facility for the life of the facility. So we, and I also might mention now too that the use cases are changing quite a bit right now in the Building Smart International community. We started out with what we identified as 50 use cases, and we've got examples of all 50 of those use cases in the BIM Building Smart International Awards program that they have. So, because one of the concerns that they had early on in the process was that we were going to use BIM for visualization and clash detection, and that was kind of where it was going to end. But there's really so much more that you can do with it. And in fact, John Messner in his presentation talked about some of those use cases. And like I say, we're kind of expanding some of those use cases now because we're looking at infrastructure and making sure that we are covering that entire spectrum. So this is a chart that, and probably you've seen various versions of this. This is kind of, it's a little more complex than most of them, but I think it also really kind of does a good job of defining where all of this stuff goes. You know, the bottom of it, again, you start at the bottom, just like with Bloom's taxonomy, but you go out and you acquire data. You know, you go out and gather data from wherever it might be available. Then you process that into information. You analyze it so it becomes knowledge. You communicate it so it becomes intelligence. You apply it so you get decisions, and then you formulate those decisions into an action plan. And it's not until you implement and create, you know, that you implement those action plans that you actually achieve value. And that's where ultimately we need to be, is understanding what value we get out of this whole effort we call BIM. And as was mentioned in the introduction, one of the other things that I'm working on now is total cost of ownership. And the primary reason for doing total cost of ownership is being able to understand value, because total cost of ownership goes way beyond just first cost. And first cost is what we usually talk about as far as, you know, what's the design and construction cost of a facility. But it's the operations, it's the main occupy the facility, it's the societal benefit of that project. You know, what's the societal benefit of a hospital? You know, why are you going to build this hospital? It's not just looking at the design and construction cost, but it's the whole package that really gets wrapped together. Of course, I could do a whole presentation on total cost of ownership, which we won't do today, obviously. So the bottom line is that until we realize, until we get all the way to the top and recognize that value, that we really haven't accomplished the overall goal. So this chart was one that we put together early on in this process, and to try to understand what the scope of the BIMBOK was. And if you look across the top, we're looking at the, well, let me look down the side first, I guess. You say, we want to talk about how we want to plan it, we want to coordinate it, we want to manage it, and we also, ultimately do it is developing the BIM itself. But we also wanted to look at, at designers. We wanted to look at what's happening during construction. We want to look at what's happening for facility management, and then what the consultants or the generalists. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as we get into this. The other thing we wanted to do was look at what do you need for entry level. If you're just coming out of school or you're in school, what is that first level that you get into this, and then ultimately over time, what is your mid-career, mid-level, and then ultimately, what is full performance look like? What does it mean when you're fully engaged and you're out there, the top of your game and things like that? What does that look like? And what kind of knowledge should you have at that point in time? The other piece that kind of fits into this and kind of guided a little bit of what we were doing, and John talked about this also, was the NBIMS version 1 part 1. What we did there was we identified developing these use cases and what goes into a use case. And so that, again, that kind of informs us as far as the level of knowledge in this body of knowledge that you would need to be able to be, again, at full performance, really. But how do you, work through that whole process and be able to get to that point? So all these things are really kind of coming together. We're working on version 4 now of the National BIM standard, but these concepts have kind of, found their way into Building Smart International and all these other efforts that we're doing across the board. So it's it all, like I say, it's all kind of coming together. I guess he also mentioned that we're looking at an organizational level of what you need to know for a BIM, as well as project level. And so that's, what is the organization? How does the organization get structured so that it does support a BIM, and not again, it's really at the owner level as well as in a company. Instead of just looking at one project at a time, what are the things that you really need to do to be overall structured to be able to support BIM? So in chapter 2, we talk about our learning objectives, the consensus process that we used, and to develop the job task analysis, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that really we felt that you needed to be able to be successful. The process we used was what's called the Delphi process, which is an interesting concept where you work together and then you work separately, and then you come back together and you do this several times so that you continue to build a it allows individual thought as well as group coordination and tying things together. So we went through three rounds of our Delphi process. And believe me, we're very appreciative of the professionals that were involved in our study, as it turned out as being a true labor of love for our industry, as we really beat them up pretty bad as far as the number of decisions that they had to go through and look at. And as we get into this a little bit further, you'll see what was involved in coming up with these all the different decisions, as far as what people need to know at different levels in their educational journey. So the and we did identify those in the folks that were involved in the book and on our website we've got that too. So this is the the committee's list of potential elements to be considered for the BOK, and we shared that broadly throughout the industry, and got feedback and validation from the industry on this process that we came up with also. And I do need to point out that this is just the first baseline attempt at this whole effort. We see this really growing. We see having to get back together and continue this process, or another group picking up the effort and continuing it. It was just a starting. And as you can see in this chart, BXP, that's the BIM execution plan. That figures into this, and several of the ISO standards and things like that figure into it. And of course, BXP is what John Messner was also talking about in his presentation, the BIM execution plan. So this is an example of a heat map that we produced. Green meaning those are the things that people, everybody agreed on. That those were the first things that were what people needed to know at that level. So it's an eye chart here, and it's not intended to be read. Certainly, if you want to be able to look at all these different heat maps in detail, you can go to our website at AIC, and we do have all of those available in very readable form. But the concept is, from the left-hand side is the entry level, and the right-hand side of the chart is full performance. So as you can see in the full performance, we expect people to know these things. At the entry level, those are concepts that might be just introduced, and you might have a working, you've heard of it before kind of thing. Dr. Wei Wu is one of the authors, of course. He was one that really did a lot of the collection and reporting the results. So that's kind of, we really a debt of gratitude to him also for that effort. So from this example, you can get an idea of what what each person felt, and this goes back to our Delphi panel now. And this is where I was talking about how much they had to go through to be able to make these different decisions, and then get consensus throughout the group. So the knowledge, skills, and abilities that were essential for the full performance. There are multiple levels of analysis of this data in the book, and I'm just showing you here this one example to get a glimpse of what the level of rigor that really went into this whole process. And so that's, like I say, if you go to our website of aicbimed.org, you can get to that, get to the information. So in chapter 3, we presented kind of the history of the education and where we are with BIM, and what we've seen over the past 15 years. And again, a lot of this has to do with who's available to teach BIM. And at the universities, and what ends up happening a lot of times is that you get a practitioner that comes in and is providing some educational support, and they may only have one class on BIM. So it's, you learn all these other things, and then you come together for your BIM class. Well, we really feel that ultimately in time, BIM is going to be taught in every class. But we discuss what the gaps are that we see that need to be resolved, and assess where the industry stands in achieving those educational goals. We're hopeful that this book will be widely applied as a tool for educational coordination throughout the AECO industry. And it's intended to provide the framework for this to occur, and the starting point for which we can evolve BIM education over time. And again, it's a starting point. We recognize that it's certainly not the end. It's just beginning. So what we see occurring in acquiring BIM talent. Excuse me. The demand is identified. qualifications are identified, the talent sources are identified, and then actual recruiting of individuals can occur. These must all be in sync with education and what we're producing. So there's a lot of the universities, they go out and have groups of practitioners that come and talk about what kind of people these organizations, these AE firms or construction firms or whatever, who they're looking for, so that they can kind of structure their education to be able to produce those students that are hireable in the industry. And that's kind of what we're looking at is, okay, what does that BIM manager need? And I'll just take it again, a side note here, that I've been very much involved in the Building Smart International Awards program over the years. And some of the projects that I've seen produced are mind-boggling, quite frankly. I mean, they're just, I can't conceive of how those BIM managers have evolved to the point of being able to manage hundreds of BIMs every week in coordinating all these for a large project. Where are we? I think the companies are growing those people internally, because I don't know that we're really turning out those people yet. But that's kind of where we need to be. And of course, the software keeps evolving and making it easier to manage some of these things. And as I say, and these are all of course, the Building Smart International projects are all projects that are done with IFC as being the foundation for information to flow and things like that. So it's I think the awards are sometimes a glimpse into the future as far as where we all will be at some point in time. We're certainly not there yet, but what the key is just where we go to get there. So in chapter 4, we address how and why the BIMBOK will inform future curriculum development, and it provides some templates and examples for curriculum developers. So that's what by the time you get to chapter 4, that's you'll be hopefully to the point of being able to start putting together some curriculum. And so we look at the the module design. Part 1 is context for instruction, and we talk about the course type, the time involved, the instructional strategy, the learner's role, the discipline, the KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, again, existing BIM KSAs that we've identified, and the overall learning outcome. So that's the first part of it. The second part is just what is the level of performance that we expect? What BIM use is supported? What tasks can be performed? What level of information is expected? What goals do you have? And many other items that we've identified here. And the templates and examples hopefully will help coordinate the efforts in education venues, again, worldwide. We see this as being a worldwide effort, certainly. In chapter 5, we get into looking at the history of the workforce planning and how to develop a BIM workforce that as a planning model and a comprehensive case study with the KSAs. We get into some, again, some examples that we have seen in our work thus far. Our strategic approach, we've noted, you focus on the job task and the KSAs. You look at varied levels of performance, entry level, middle, mid, and full performance, and also looking at different roles of the users, of the designers, contractors, facility managers, operators, and consultants. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things that we did was we went out and interviewed some experts. And my area that that I did my interviews on was in the consulting side of it, and really kind of found this was extremely interesting, because it's number one, it's validating our job tasks and our KSAs with these industry experts. We learned several important lessons that are passed on to the reader in this chapter. Most importantly, we found, like say, with the consultants and generalists, we found that it was a much broader category than we had first expected, because there's BIM consultants for specific disciplines, such as like applying BIM for structural engineering. Then there's also specific consultants related to IT issues, such as cybersecurity and those type of things. And just, how do you manage these models and name models and all those kind of things. And then there are also additional consultants that are just providing support to for overall BIM, and just, again, an owner will ask for a BIM, say, okay, what does that mean? Somebody has to go through and define that, and define what it is that they really want. Of course, one of the other aspects that isn't necessarily covered in the education part, but it's also hugely important, is being able to get the owners to be able to use the BIMs after they've been created. And that seems to still be an issue in the industry. Excuse me. We've done some consulting in that arena in trying to, owners that have BIMs, trying to open them up and get them to understand how they can apply those to the operations of their facilities and maintenance of their facilities and things like that. And getting the BIM that was created for design and construction to a level, maybe a digital twin of the existing building. There's quite a bit of there's quite a step between those two. And again, going back to the whole thing with experts, in most cases, these consultants are experts that the people we interviewed are definitely all experts, but it's really a rare commodity. And how do you really create an expert? What's the entry level for creating an expert? Or do you have to get to full performance before you really are an expert? We had a lot of varying views that are included in the discussion about that aspect of it, which I found very interesting, and like I say, kind of open some thinking on how all that how that all does come together. So in chapter 6, what's the future of the BIM BOK? And as I mentioned, this is not the end point; it's only the beginning. What do we do for the digital transformation to continue? And how do we, and I think, there's changes we're seeing already in AI and some of that kind of that environment. So we delve into what the future is, what the next steps are, how we can approach this. And also, to be honest, one of the reasons why I was interested in putting this out is I had a project that was for Department of Energy while I was at the National Institute of Building Sciences, and what we looked at was in the energy world, there were some 80 different certifications for energy positions. We looked at 5 different positions, and like energy manager, energy auditor, or things like that. And there were so many different credentials that neither the employee nor the employer knew which ones were valid. And some of them were really great. Some of them were like, you can go out on the internet and get a PhD in in architecture, but it's not really of much value. And that's kind of what we found with these different energy positions. We're starting to see some of that occur in the BIM community also. And so what we wanted to try to do is hopefully, get ahead of that a little bit and be able to have this BIM BOK out there that, if people could certify that they were using this BIM BOK, that they were in fact, providing some valid education. But what we're looking at is, how do you go out and ultimately get this included in the accreditation boards that are out there, and how do you get, certificates? How do you get certification? All these different aspects. Certification comes under ISO. There's an ASTM, American Standard for certificates, and I'm sure other countries have the same kind of thing. But again, it's all based on the foundation is the KSAs and the things that we've put in this job task analysis that we've put together with this effort. So, like I say, currently there's very little coordination, and that's one of the things that really needs to come out of this. So how do we tie that back, even all the way back to Bloom's taxonomy, and as far as what the different courses that are being provided and by the different universities and things like that, just how deep are they getting into education, like say, versus training. Another aspect that we looked at is just, again, who's kind of driving this whole thing. Education clearly remains at the nexus of BIM related activities. And it really adds the complexity, as each aspect needs to be informed to the others as what is a truly team effort. And I might say what I see as a team effort is more of a not necessarily a swim team or a track team where everybody's kind of doing their individual events, but more as a baseball team or football team or a volleyball team where everybody has to be working together to be able to for the team to win. In volleyball, if you're familiar with volleyball, you have somebody receives the serve and then they bump it to a setter who sets it to a hitter, and they make a kill. And it's those those three sequences of events that happen before it really before you get that point. And that's really the same kind of thing that happens here, is that we've got to have the designer and even the designer working with the contractor and they're designing things that actually can be maintained and operated at the least cost. And that's how we get into the whole thing of total cost of ownership. Really looking at that as being able to, what is when the designer comes up with something, how can we make sure that it is the least cost for the life of the project, and not necessarily just the cheapest product that they can put in there in the initial and their first cost. We also see, as you can see in this chart, the educator really kind of plays a key role in making this, again, creating those people that are going to be available for the long haul, and creating those sustainable projects, and all the things we talk about with energy and sustainability and climate management and all those kind of things. It all kind of comes into play, and we've got to have people that are ready for the challenge. So with that, I'll kind of say thank you, and again, I think there's I don't know if the discount, it was available until April 30th. I'm not sure that we're now May 11th, whether it's still in place, but you can try to check and on the Wiley website. that's also, it's the Wiley website is where the ebook is available. For some reason, the ebook isn't available on Amazon, but you can get the ebook through Wiley directly. If talk to any of the other authors. Unfortunately, of course, Glenda is not with us anymore, but certainly Way or Tammy, and I don't know how many of you know Raymond, but Raymond's very much instrumental also in our AIC effort. All five were, and certainly 4 of us still are very much involved. So I will, with that, I will close and open it up back to, or hand it back to you all to ask some questions.
Thank you, Dick. Very interesting, your presentation. And here we have some questions from the audience. Let me read some of them. From Sebastian Vasquez, he asked, this organization, AIC, is a coaching of how BIM projects should be organized?
I'm sorry, it's AIC is what?
Yes, if the organization is a coaching of how BIM project, a coach from how BIM project should be organized.
I think it's just, we provide guidance as much as anything. We're not necessarily providing any specific consulting services. Now, I say that with the various universities that are members. I'm sure there's quite a few that would be more than happy to to help other schools or things like that get organized. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think that this response, that this more not a consultant service, also is a guide.
Right.
Correctly. Thank you. From Roberto Sanchez, have 2 questions. The first one is, said, in Mexico, we have modelers and designers, specialists in installation systems engineers. What is the time you consider that those engineers will adopt the modeling tools?
Well, that's a hard question. I think that's and what we find is that it's dependent a lot on the owners, and because the owner asks for certain services. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is if they don't ask for those services, a lot of the A&E firms and contractors don't provide them. I think I've seen certainly in contracting, there's a lot more use of BIM. And I think that's probably, it seems to be the most mature anyway. And because a lot of the tools now, that you use in construction manage of BIM information directly from a model electronically into equipment like total station and inside the GIS and GPS anyway. So I think there's a lot of it's kind of the it's kind of a mix that as far as the there's some advanced construction firms that are really using a lot of the technology. There's other certainly firms that are have barely started. And again, it has a lot to do with an owner saying that this is what they want in a project, and then a company will decide whether or not they want to gear up to be able to provide the technology request that the owner is asking for. And so it varies quite a bit. We see it varying internationally. Different countries have different levels of involvement and participation. We see it. You get multinational companies that are even multinational companies that in some countries aren't doing as much as in others. I know Skanska, for example, is one example that I've seen, and I've talked to them. They haven't done as much in the United States because some of the union requirements and some of the permitting and things like that isn't as supportive of some of implementing some of these ideas. And yet I know that one of the things that we're looking at in the United States is being able to get information to flow better, in that we have, like a designer will go ahead and build a BIM, and then they hand it over to the permitting organization, the county or whatever, the state organization, and they then want things on paper. So they have to print everything out on paper and then, get it through their permitting, and then they can go hand it over to the contractor, construction contractor. And a lot of times they'll recreate a BIM, which just doesn't make a lot of sense. You really be able to have it in an electronic format and move it through that electronic format all the way through the process. One of the you look at something like COBE. I don't know how many people are familiar with COBE, but it's Construction Operations Building Information Exchange, and now actually that at the international level was being called Handover. And so, but what they're doing there is they're taking information that is created during design and carrying it through, adding additional information. So in design, you say, I need a door or a hollow metal door or something like that. And then in construction, you identify who the manufacturer is and all the specific details. Maybe let's say use a pump as maybe a better example, even where you say that you have a pump that has a certain number of CFM or some volume that it has to put out, and then you identify in construction what the actual pump is that's purchased, who is it purchased from, what is the you include that in your COBE, and you then pass that on to the facility owner. And a lot of the IWIMS software now, the work order processing programs and the CFFM or CFM and the CAFM programs and CMMS, I guess what I was thinking of, programs will directly read that data into their into their databases. So things like Maximo and some of those tools can directly read that information. So now you've got all this information that has been able to flow through the whole process as one stream of information. I guess I probably answered multiple questions there.
Yes. Also, another question from Robert said, at these times, a modeler, no professional engineer, how much money earns yearly? Estimate. A modeler without P.
Good question. I really don't have a good feel for that.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yes.
I would certainly, and again, I think that it's, that is the future. And I do think that I will say that the BIM managers and those positions are hugely sought after right now. And so as that, and anything that's a BIM related area right now is in high demand. And of course, anytime you're in high demand, supply and demand kind of thing happens, and you're going to, you're going to get significantly more money for it. In fact, I do have one example that actually was fairly local, and I know that it was a guy that I think it was was it his son, or might have been a son-in-law that was working for the company, and he was their BIM manager, and he got hired away from this family company at twice the salary of what his dad was able to provide. So there again, that demand is out there, and like I said, it was twice the amount. So his dad said, "Go." And that's the kind of thing that is definitely happening. And I know that some of the projects that we've worked on where the BIM manager was just out of school. I mean, and this was a big company, but they have multiple projects, and just trying to be able to find people that could be their BIM managers. They were pulling them almost directly out of school to be in fairly responsible positions. So it's a little bit scary in that regard, that we need to be able to get some people not just at entry level, but we need to get up to mid-career, and have some additional knowledge. And that goes back to that whole thing we were talking about with consultants, and how do you create these consultants? How do you create these? There's not a lot of folks out there that are looking at it, that generalist role where they understand the full picture. There's a lot of people that are focused on a specific aspect, so if you have more of a generalist role, I think there's potentially even a bigger opportunities if you really understand that big picture. And of course, that sometimes means that you're at the higher level of your time in your career and things like that. So,
yes. Another question from Robert is related with the previous one. Is in the global talent shortage, do you think it is necessary that modelers should be PE?
The modeler should be, I'm sorry?
Yes, if the modelers should be a professional engineer.
Oh. Yeah, I think that's, again, I go back to, people talking about the feeling is that you do have to have that knowledge, that specific knowledge in an area of expertise, and then you kind of grow out from that. So I think you're not necessarily just learning to be a BIM manager or whatever. I think you need to first have a knowledge of a certain phase of the process, and then kind of stretch out and be the T part comes later. That I think is probably the most common approach anyway. Yeah.
Yes, correctly. Well, another question from Juan Manuel Gutierrez. He asked, knowing the meaning KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, BIM, like as new language proficiency, what do you recommend it to build or retain BIM talent?
Well, and like I say, that's where you get into it's obviously it's a continuous learning process. And I think, again, that's the big, to retain BIM talent, you're going to have to recognize that as that person grows in their capability, that they're going to be more valuable. And because of the limited number of people out there that do have a knowledge of BIM, there's going to be a lot of contention for them being hired away from a company, as I mentioned earlier. So I think that being able to retain that capability is going to be difficult. Just because of the demand that's out there right now. It will, you don't want somebody that's going to just sit there and do his job day in and day out without really kind of learning on, in a continuous learning kind of environment. And that's where I say that where the book can come and become valuable in trying to figure out what are the paths that that somebody wants to take. And again, I think that it's if a company recognizes that there is an avenue that somebody should take to be able to move from that entry level that they hired them as to through the interim level to a full performance level. If they provide them that education, that educational opportunity to continually learning, they'll be able to hold on to them longer. Otherwise, they're going to go and try to find where they can continue to grow in another company. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just being able to understand what that, coming up with a training plan, if you will, to give somebody the opportunity to grow, to continue to grow. That's what I think, people are seeking through their career, is, to be able to do more as they go. So, yeah.
Okay. Another question from Robert. He asked about the operation and maintenance. When do you think that the designers will privilege the operation and maintenance sequence before aesthetics?
Oh, well, I've always kind of, and this goes back to even, how different schools provide the education. Aesthetics are, that's kind of if it's just aesthetically nice, it's probably not necessarily doing the owner a real service, because it really needs to be not only, and this is where you get to be I think what a good designer is going to be able to deal with the aesthetics, as well as providing something that is operational and can be maintained. Because you don't want a situation where the whole thing falls apart, a short period down the road, and the owner is going to, the owner already has a hard time sometimes with the design of a facility that, they're not overly thrilled with some of the designs that they get. And again, some of the costs of maintaining. I mean, you hear just horror stories from, trying to go through and maintain some of these facilities. There was one example I know, they had a boiler, and the boiler was in such a location where you couldn't pull the tubes out to be able to replace them, when they needed to be replaced, what was it, 20 some years down the road, or 25 years down the road, or whatever. And they had to take out a concrete masonry unit wall in order to be able to pull the tubes out of this boiler. I mean, that's just crazy, and again, that's just because nobody thought about it. And so I think that, being a good designer, in my mind anyway, is somebody that can build in the aesthetics, but at the same time be able to provide a facility that is operational and can be maintained and really has some longevity. This is where we see, again, now we're going to talk a little bit about the total cost of ownership issue, is that we get, there's different kinds of owners. There's owners, and why APA, which is the physical plant, basically physical plant people from universities, why they were the ones that started the, it's the APA TCO standard. And why they did that was because the universities create these facilities and then have to operate and maintain them. And so they fully understand what the implications are of that long-term, long-term maintaining those facilities. So you'll get, and you get a, somebody gives you a grant to build a new laboratory at the university, or a new educational building of some kind, and maybe gives you a lot of money that you go out and hire a big name designer. That university still better be on top of that as far as being able to make sure that the product that's delivered can in fact be operated and maintained at a reasonable cost, and at least cost, ideally. So that's where I think that kind of comes into play. It's and I know a lot of universities still focus just on the aesthetics and not necessarily on that bigger picture, which is very unfortunate. And I'm hoping that that's becoming a smaller number. Aesthetics are very important, but they're not the whole picture. See that?
Okay. Another question from Howard Flores. He asked, is there any institution that promotes and certify the use of BIM?
There's no.
We don't have more questions from the audience. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Also for showing here the knowledge about the knowledge certificate from BIM Initiative. To thank you for this presentations. This is in Spanish also, but he is made by Iniciativa BIM. Also, this is from you, Dana Kennish Smith, and the topic that we discuss here is the developing BIM talent. And this is the BIM 2020 International Seminar. So we thank you for an appreciated time, Deke, for share your experience and talk about all the process that is incorporated in the BIM book.
Well, certainly my pleasure. And if anybody has any questions later on, that I'm certainly more than happy. And certainly anybody that's an educator, we're more than happy to have you join our AIC group. There is no cost. We do have an annual, typically we have an annual conference. The last few years we haven't because of the COVID, but we hope to get back into the swing of things. Actually, we're teaming up with George Borkovich, who's they are doing a conference in California this year, and we were close to, we were going to participate with them, but a lot of the universities have lost their travel budgets with the COVID, and so we weren't getting enough people to participate. So I'm going to do a couple presentations remotely, but we're hopefully going to next year get back into having face-to-face meetings. We'll see, hopefully.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and also we take note.
and we do have a monthly meeting that we do have discussion and things like that with different educators. So there's a lot of thought that goes into some of those a lot of interesting concepts and things that come out of those sessions too. So more than happy to have anybody participate.
Yes. Also, he's asking if you can give the link from the group also for maybe they need to enter to the web page.
I'm sorry, which?
Yes, for join to the group, is asking some link. If do you have for participate in the AIC?
Oh yeah, just it's in fact, if I can get here, I'll share my screen again, and I have one more. Here we go. At the bottom there's the https aicbimed.com or .org. Oops, nope, hold on. There we go. Now,
yes,
now you see
yes,
it.
Yes, he's there.
Push the button. So yeah, down there towards the bottom. And I guess my email's not on there. I can be reached at, well, if you go to that website, you can just hit the contact me and we'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, we appreciate Deke, very interesting all that you share here in this session, and also that you are open to collaborate also in this effort to communicate and adopt the BIM methodology in all the countries. So,
And like I say, I can tie you back into, as we were discussing prior to us getting started, we tie you back into Building Smart International and things like that too. So. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Hey, thank you all to be here, and we will close this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pues gracias a todos por acompañarnos. Gracias, Iván. Lo logramos gracias a ustedes.
Gracias, sí, fue buena la audiencia también. Buenas preguntas.
Sí, gracias, Elías.
No, con gusto. Fue muy interesante, digo, mi opinión es que es un tema...